Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima and I'm here checking out Streets of Rage 4. The 20 years, well not 20 years in the making, but 20 years coming sequel to the ridiculously good set of brawlers that were released back on the Genesis. And it was made by Lizardcube. And a lot of people were really upset about that because, well, it's not old school pixel art in the same way that the Streets of Rage games are, although it wasn't exactly old school back at the time, you get what I mean. It was also made by a group called Guard Crush Games, who were responsible for a couple of beat-em-ups back in the day, and I do not remember the exact name of the one that I saw by them, which made me laugh out loud, but it was so close to Streets of Rage in name, it was almost as silly as like Roads of Rage, or Streets of Fury, or something like that. It was so close in that sort of sense that it just made me laugh. But basically, it's guys who are really good at graphics, and guys who know their beat-em-up shit taking on Streets of Rage. Question is, did they pull it off? Allow me to answer that with a sound effect. Yes, that is me applauding because they legitimately did a really good fucking job. There's a couple of things that I'm annoyed with, but frankly they weren't exactly all that great back in Streets of Rage either, so that can be seen more as maintaining the status quo more than trying to update things a bit. But let's go over the basics just while we're here. So, this game is actually so close to the originals that they've actually implemented a legacy control set in the options menu, which gives you the old 3-button style controls with the 2 buttons to do multiple different kinds of things controls going on off to the side, and that is fantastic because, well, it just means that they've stuck really close to the original formula. I stuck with the modern controls myself because it maps a few things like being able to do back attacks and the new star power attacks, which are normally on 2 buttons, to the right trigger and right shoulder. So I'm absolutely fine with this approach because it means that it's a lot easier to do back attacks and star power attacks without particularly flubbing it. Although I will admit, if you're going to play this game, don't play it on an Xbox 360 controller because it seems like, at least for the Xbox 360 pad, it has a lot of trouble determining what direction you're pressing, and that has gotten me into trouble more than a few times. So I'd suggest being careful about that. Maybe play it on a PlayStation 4 or something with a D-pad that isn't absolute garbage. The only reason I picked up the Xbox 360 pad was because it was the only controller I really had available to me at the time. I recently just rebuilt my computers. Well, I didn't so much rebuild my computer as swap the power supply out, but anyone who's put together a computer knows that it's basically just a couple of steps away from basically rebuilding an entire computer. But anyway, so yeah, other than the controls being a bit whack in the sense that it can't really detect directions that well on things like analog sticks, it's absolutely fine. The controls work as you would expect. What are the controls? What can you do with them? Well, you have your regular attack. You can hold it down for a strong attack. You can jump and then attack in the air. You can do back attacks. If you get close, you can do a grab, which you can turn into a downwards throw. You do also have your special attack, which in the previous games worked a bit differently. In this game, they've kind of gone for an in-between between Streets of Rage 2 and Streets of Rage 3. In this game, if you pull out a special attack, which you have a defensive, which gives you invincibility frames, an offensive, and an air version, it will drain your health, but it'll leave part of the health bar green, so that if you actually manage to land attacks successfully afterwards, you will be able to get that health back. But if you get attacked, you'll actually lose it. Really clever idea. And trust me, that defensive attack is incredibly useful. You have no idea how nice it is to be able to pull out an emergency defensive maneuver right at the last second to just save your ass. Especially when it comes to the game's new combo system. Now, you can see it in the top left corner there. 14 hits at the time of this audio, but I'm probably going to have to sync it up slightly differently to avoid some video issues. But basically, the game now determines, now it keeps count of how many hits you've got, and it actually adds the amount of hits to the score. Or rather, just, you know, a multiplied version of it, you know, because score purposes. So it is beneficial to you to get as many hits in as fast as humanly possible and not get hit in the meantime. So combining using a defensive special move to save your ass and then getting a few extra hits on the combo and getting 1,000 extra points for it is really useful because you get extra lives off points now. So you need to be very, very good at keeping the combo up if you want to survive longer than a few minutes. I was playing this on the hard difficulty and I definitely did game over a few times until I learned the stages and how exactly I was going to need to deal with it. The runs you're seeing in this video are actually my first runs through each stage. I kind of got lucky. I was actually doing really well with Blaze for some reason. I'm not usually very good with her. I usually do a lot better with Alex, but for some reason I was just doing fantastically with Blaze, so I just stuck with Blaze. But yes, the stages are quite difficult, and some of them have a couple of gimmicks that I'm not really a fan of. The main thing being that there's a couple of stages that start you off injured, but with a green portion of your health bar. And you have to put in the effort to get in as many hits as possible before you take a hit the first time, otherwise you might end up losing something like half your health bar. Which is honestly kind of frustrating to deal with, because, well, considering that this game can be quite a bit difficult, having a level start off and basically be, oh, hey, you need to do perfectly for the first few waves, otherwise you're not going to get as much health as you normally would, kind of sucks. But outside of that, the stages are actually really well designed. They have preset enemy waves, so nothing random about it. You know what's coming and you know how to prepare for it. You know how to deal with what's coming your way, or at least hopefully you should figure something out by the time you're on your 3rd or 4th run. And the enemies, in general, are just really well done. There's a bunch of old and new enemies in here, and they're all just, like, they're all really fun to fight. A couple of them are a bit of a pain in the neck. Like, I hate the bloody, massive guys in the traditional Japanese karate outfits. I absolutely despise those guys because there doesn't seem to be much of a way to actually fight them. More often than not, I would attack them and they would immediately go into the block state, which meant they got a free hit on me. Those were unbelievably annoying to deal with, and there's probably going to be even more on the higher difficulties, but yeah, they were just kind of frustrated to deal with. There's a couple of other ones too, which just kind of feel like they're put in there to screw with you. Like I think they're called Dylan and Blake. I can't remember if those are the exact names, but those guys feel more like they're designed to, what's the word I'm looking for? Punish you for trying to jump. You'll have 2 enemies on the left side that you'll need to jump to take care of, and 2 enemies on the right side will punish you if you do so much as let 1 foot leave the ground too high. And it's kind of frustrating in that sense. But it still works as a combat scenario, more or less. You just kind of need to maneuver your way around them a little better. The enemies are great. Especially a bunch of the new ones like the police officers. Those are real fun to fight. And they give you some really interesting ones going on. Like towards the later stages, they give you like 3 dudes with shields that you need to do some pretty specific bashing through. And then they give you some guys backing them up behind them who have these shock potions, which they throw at you to make parts of the ground uninhabitable. It works really well. And there's a few situations like that where you think to yourself, oh man, they thought this out way ahead of time, just to piss you off. Not to mention the bosses. I actually had a surprisingly easy time with the bosses. There's a couple of them that are kind of cheap, but they're actually pretty well designed and fair for the most part. The only really disappointing ones are the ones I'm not going to spoil, but they have this tendency to put a boss in, and then another boss in, and then a boss fight in an even later stage will be, hey, fight 2 of these guys at the same time, and they still end up being surprisingly easy to deal with. Which is just kind of annoying, but not too bad in the grand scheme of things. It works. It can just be a little odd, that's all. But still, it's all backed up by the fact that, well, it's kind of hard to explain, but the motions, the gameplay, the hitting of the enemies, the throws, just everything about the second-to-second gameplay just feels right. I don't know how they managed to get it this close without reverse engineering the old Streets of Rage code, because seriously, this is so close to the original games that it even puts Streets of Rage Remake to shame. It is just the stuttering of the enemies when you hit them, the animations of like the throws and the attacks, it's all so close to the point where I can't help but think to myself, did they just trace over the original animations? Because it is legitimately just down pat accurate as to what it's like. All of the hits are really satisfying. All of the throws are really satisfying. All of the enemies being sent flying into a wall, bouncing off it, and letting you get a few extra punches in and send them back into the same wall for a bit more juggling. It remains thoroughly satisfying throughout the entire game. I don't know how they managed to do it, but it's so on point. And it's so just intrinsically satisfying from moment to moment that it's incredibly well done. And it's also lent credibility by the animations and the art style, because it's Lizardcube. They did Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap. That game looked absolutely beautiful, and this game is no exception. The background art is gorgeous. The sprites are incredibly well animated. The overall quality of everything together is just down pat. It is legitimately some of the best two-dimensional graphics that have ever existed. And of course it is. It's by Lizardcube. Would you expect anything less? Legitimately really well done. Combine that with the soundtrack. Now, I admit I wasn't paying very close attention to the soundtrack, but from what I did hear of it, because well, I was focusing on the gameplay, don't blame me, but from what I did manage to hear of the soundtrack when the game settled down a bit and let me take a breather, it didn't feel like I left the Genesis at all. I mean, it's very obviously like not bleepy bloopy AY synth chip, but it still sounds in composition and in instrument choice almost exactly like something you would hear in Streets of Rage 2. And I'm not going to argue with that in the slightest, because it legitimately sounds great. It fits the theme to a T. Nothing particularly stands out, although there's a couple of points in both graphics and sound where it's very clearly throwbacks to the original Streets of Rage trilogy, but obviously it's going to be a bloody fan wank. After 20 years of waiting for a sequel to Streets of Rage, it's going to be a fan wank. There's nothing you can do about it. That's also kind of helped out by the fact that you can unlock all the original versions of the characters and play through them in the arcade and the story modes and all that. Speaking of which, the way the game attempts to keep you coming back is via a bunch of extra modes and a bunch of unlockables. The more you play, the more points you add to your lifetime stock, which is how you unlock the older versions of all the characters. Nice touch. You do also have a bunch of extra modes to get unlocked. You get the usual boss rush and stage select. You do also get a arcade mode, which is get to the end entirely on 1 credit, no continues, which I am not going to try because that is going to be insane. And you do also get a head-to-head battle mode. That's nice. Nothing particularly wrong with that. Not something I'd ever play. You do also have online co-op and local co-op, but those aren't things I weren't particularly able to test for this release. I mainly just played through it solo on the hard difficulty. There are 5 difficulties. It goes easy, medium, hard, hardest, and then mania, which is a difficulty that they don't unlock until you finish the game, at least once. And I did finish the game. It took me 3 hours. On the dot, like seriously. I think I was like 1 or 2 minutes over 3 hours. This is obviously including continues and all that. Nothing particularly wrong with that sort of runtime for a beat 'em up, especially one that takes as much effort to build the presentation as this sort of thing does. Will I come back to it? I probably will. I'm probably just going to give it some time to like fade into my memory before I try it again, because I think I know the game too well at this point to like really give it a bit much. Although I could play it on hardest for a bit of an extra challenge, but you know, just give it some time. It's Streets of Rage. It'll hold up. There is no way that this won't hold up. What else do I have to say about it? It's a really well done thing. There's a couple of things that I find myself a little bit annoyed by. Like, it maintains like how you need to be on the exact same vertical plane to hit dudes with a particular weapon. So sometimes that can be annoying. Same thing with your attacks, but it's a little more generous. But there are still one or two times, well, more than one or two times, but a few times throughout the game where I found myself punching what I could have sworn was hitting a guy, but I turned out to just be like 1 pixel off, so I wasn't actually able to hit him. Those sort of situations kind of suck. And the chain counter is something that kind of annoys me because if you get hit, you lose it all. And considering that you really need those points in order to earn yourself extra lives and like stand a better chance of getting through, especially on something like arcade mode, it can kind of suck when you've got like a 40 hit combo going and then you get hit and it's all gone. I would have appreciated something like, say, you keep half of the points that you get from the combo if you get hit at the end of it. Just something like that didn't encourage me to like back off and let the chain meter drain away instead of getting right back into the action. Because sometimes you have to do that in order to keep your combo meter going up. Which I don't exactly appreciate, but yeah, I can understand why they did it. It just doesn't mean that it's not annoying as hell when you've got a big combo going. And you just have to be like, okay, I better back off and get the points from this so I can get the life. But that's just kind of how these things go, I suppose. So yeah. The only real problems I have with this game are something inherited from the original Streets of Rage, which is the whole vertical plane thing being a little bit too precise for my personal liking. The fact that you need to back off to let the combo meter run down because they're kind of annoying about how quickly it runs down, and the fact that you can get a 40 hit combo and then just lose it all completely. And the fact that the controls can be a little bit weird on something like an analog stick because sometimes you'll just misinterpret directions and you'll end up throwing weapons or doing the wrong attack or something like that. So it's probably recommended you play this game on something like a proper D-pad or maybe a proper like joystick that has micro switches. Outside of that though, it is legitimately fantastic. Like, it has an absolutely wonderful presentation. The music fits fantastically. The graphical style is wonderful. They've done a fantastic job of mimicking the original animations while being so on point to the feel of the original games that it feels almost, that it feels like they reverse engineered the original game instead of like actually playing, instead of like actually making it from the ground up, because it literally feels that close. The second-to-second gameplay feels fantastic. The punches, the kicks, the move animations, the feedback you get on the enemies when you're hitting them with the attacks is just right. The stage design is great. There's a ton of different kinds of enemies to learn your way around, and they know how to play with them to screw with you. And while I wouldn't say there's a massive amount of content, it's nice to have the option to like go for a 1cc run, have the different difficulties with the different kinds of enemies attached to them, have the, just have the ability to unlock older characters and take them through the new game. So you've got a fair amount of variety going on for you there if you're really into it. But the 3 hours that the game lasts for, outside of those little niggles I mentioned earlier, are all just like, they're all really minor things on an otherwise sublime experience. They did an absolutely fantastic job reconstructing Streets of Rage for the modern era. And yeah, I would highly recommend it. Apparently there are some problems with the online co-op. I saw that on Digital Foundry's video. That I can't say anything about that. The local co-op probably works fine, but hell, even just for a 3-hour game I paid like $25 US for, it was something like $35.95 here. I don't regret it for a second. I'll probably come back and play it again someday. If I have anyone over who likes beat 'em ups, which will be never, because I'm forever alone, I'll probably whip up Streets of Rage and play Streets of Rage 4 and play it with them. After we play Streets of Rage 2. But yeah, also it's a fantastic just fan wank. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's even some weird shit going on. Like, I haven't even talked about the options menu in this. Like, I am playing the PC version for this, and the PC version, from what I can tell, runs fine. It's locked at 60 frames a second, but that's perfectly okay. It's a Lizard Cube game. I expect nothing less. But they have a lot of good options in the options menu, none of which would particularly annoy me, at least on this rig, because this is a 8700K and an RTX 2080. It can run this shit. But yeah, I saw no technical problems with the PC port whatsoever. Actually, no, that's a lie. I did get a little bit of stuttering in between, like, loads between levels, but it was, like, so minor that it was, like, not even half a second of stuttering, and that was it. It was fine. There's also a couple of other neat little options outside, like, you have the option to choose what the food pickups look like. I don't know why, but you do, and that's great. But yeah, absolutely fantastic little game. I hope they fix the online co-op. As I said, I can't speak to it because I didn't try it in time for this video. But it is absolutely sublime. Even when you're playing it in single player or local co-op if you have the friends. Highly, highly recommended. I'm going to shut up and let you watch the rest of this gameplay now. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.